Hello and welcome back to the channel, where this week we're going to be doing something a little different, since I want to go back on a project I've been doing, which consists of a SQLite database that I then linked to a GUI thanks to decorator. So the goal here is going to be to go through the basic setup of the class object that is the database. So let's get right into it. So let's start with importing sqlite, going ahead of myself here, sqlite3 as sq, and then we'll start with a class database. Okay, that is not gonna take any argument. We're just gonna create our init method. So let's go into the init method. I went to PyCharm to be a little faster on those stuff, because I don't want to go into a deep explanation. I just want to go into the basics of creating this object. So first I'm going to create self.con, which is our connection to our first file. So what we're going to do here is connect ourselves to a database in our directory. If the file already exists, and if I create, for example, my database.db, which you could see I already created once, obviously, we're going to be searching for my database.db, which is the extension for SQLite files and databases, in the directory we're in. If it doesn't exist in there, we're going to create it automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. Then what we're going to do is act on that database, and this is going to go with a cursor. So self.curse, we're going to call it is self.con.cursor. Okay, and this is how we initiate our ability to impact the database. And then what we're going to do is create our first table in that database, right? So there's one problem though. Every time I'm going to initiate that file, I'm going to connect to the same database, which is okay, but I want to automatically create a new table if it doesn't exist yet. So what I'm going to do is a try and accept verification. So we're going to try self.curse.execute and create our table. So the cursor that we created here has an execute method, which is our command center to input queries for SQL. So we're just going to be doing a simple create table. We're going to call it main table, just in case we're going to have secondary tables, which is consisting of just basically two informations. We don't need to go deeper than that. An ID, which is text, and which is going to be our primary key because we don't want people to have the same ID, and a password, which is going to be text because we said so. And if it already exists, if we cannot do this query, we're just going to go into an except error, and I know that this is the kind of error that we go into if we try to do that in SQLite. And then we're good, just to be sure that it worked out, we're going to print main table already exists, and then we're sure. So yeah, that's it for the setup of our basic table. And then what I want is to have multiple functions that are going to allow me to interact with that database, given that in a GUI I'm going to have buttons and fields to insert things. So I'm going to have to be able to connect those two together. So let's start first with a little console for you to enter any kind of query. So bd console method is going to be a basic cquery that we're going to take from an input for now. Maybe later on this is going to come from a text box in the GUI or something. Enter your query, and we're going to use that input in a cursor that we're going to execute with the query. Okay, but this is not going to affect the database. It's going to change it, yeah, but if we stop everything, tomorrow it won't be updated with that information. What you need to do is to use a commit method to tell the database, like, yeah, I want this information to be added to the table, or to update the table in that way. This is very practical because what you're going to do is, imagine this is linked to the GUI. Well, if the user just mixed up what he was doing, and you send a little pop-up saying like, are you sure you want to change this to that? Are you sure you want to add this information? And he says no, you want to be able to not do anything to your database. You don't want it to be already added to the database yet. So we could here have a try on an if statement or something, like just to check out on what the user would be saying. For now, we're just going to do a con.commit to automatically commit. Note that we are committing the connection and not the cursor. Okay, so it's the connection that is committing the information. The cursor is opening it for changes. That's how I see it and understood it the best. But then maybe you want to add more complex stuff, and that we can do, and I'm not going to go too deep into that. You can do it with something that I call the control center, and I'm just going to add it here for you people, just for you to be able to execute a script. So the method execute script is for you to do stuff that are more complicated than the basic query in SQLite. So nested queries, more complicated stuff with multiple lines and maybe indentation that you needed to organize your stuff. So like that. Yeah, it's nice to have it, okay, but it's basically the same code as what we had above, so I'm not going to go further ahead with that. Then obviously, what do we want to do? We want to add a value. So add value. And what's interesting here is that for once, we're going to have arguments, p-word and log, which are going to be add log as the ID and p-word as the password. Okay. What else? Here, we're going to have to use something called placeholders in SQLite. So let's go with the basic stuff. Still .curse, .execute, same thing, insert into main table, the values, and here this is where you would put your values. So for example, you could add Tony Stark, okay, and his password would be I am Iron Man, like so, and you'd be good. But this is a function that you want to call often from a GUI, so you need those to be variables. What you're going to do is use another argument of your method execute, so add it here, and add a tuple consisting of the amount of values you need to add in your table. So here we have two values to add, and we want those two values to be the log and the password, so we add it here. But how do we tell SQLite that this is going here and this is going there? Well, we're going to do it with those placeholders that we were talking about, which is in SQLite, for example, question mark. This is the basic one I see everywhere. You could use different methods. You have other ways of doing it. For now, this is just more than enough for me, so let's stick to this. And just like before, we're gonna commit it right away. Okay, that's not bad. That's pretty good. Another thing, like two last things I want to do, and this is gonna be like kind of more of the same, like deleting an entry, updating an entry. Like if you know about SQL queries, you don't really need those explained, I guess. Just know that that you can do something that is interesting is put an f string, and this variable, you don't need the question mark system, the placeholder system. You could use your curly brackets and f string to maybe access different tables. For example, in my GUI, I know that this is the username. The username brings to his own table, and then you use that as a variable to access it. Okay, so that's a possibility. But then what we're going to want to do is check out our table to see if the value is indeed inside of it. So let's create that function check table, which is not going to take anything else than the table itself, because I told you maybe later on I'm going to have another table. But since right now we're only working with one, we're going to assign it this standard value, which is main table. So what's interesting with the check table function is that we're going to use the select method to select everything from the table. We have different things in SQLite to do that properly. I just chose to go that route. So we're going to say that for row in self dot curse not execute, and then we're going to say select. But by the way, I'm writing things like in capital letters here because they're keywords in SQL. It doesn't need to be capital letters, but it makes it easier to read, and it's a good way to keep track of what you're doing. Okay, and of course, to make it so that this table is working as a variable, we're going to add the f string. And for all those, for each rows that our select from query is going to bring back, we're going to print them. Print row. Why do we need to do that? Well, it's because the object you're getting back from this query is not a proper list that you can print. It's an object that you need to iterate through. And so you can do it like so. And this is how we're going to do for now. Maybe I'll show you how I'm going to do it for the GUI though. And now we're going to test our little code to see if everything up until then is okay. And I'm going to use an if name equals main, which for most people here must be something familiar. For people that don't know about it, you should definitely check it out. It's just a way for you to be sure that when you're creating a class or some complex code and you want to test it out, you're not going to import your test into any other code that you're going to use this class from. This is kind of messed up the way I'm saying it. Like if I create a new module, a new script that is going to use this class object, I don't want to be using my test code in that new module, right? I don't want to be doing like creating a GUI and having errors and having this go into my test when I'm just calling it for my GUI. So I create this, which is saying if the name of the equals main equals sorry, so the main file where we are, it's gonna work out. So I didn't really study into that to give you everything. I don't have great vocabulary yet, so dig into that yourself. You need to know about that. So we're my bad, a little headset issue, no sound, it's okay. So what we're gonna do now is add a list that I found it because I can't be bothered to type it again. Here is the list. So the list is gonna be just those 3 sets of informations, okay, that we want to add to our table. So how is it gonna go? Let's create a first test object that is a database object, and this first test we're gonna add a value, and this value is gonna be tilt. What's going on? Oh yeah, my tab obviously. Tilt W and password 123, which is obviously the best password you could expect, right? And we're gonna do a first test dot check check table. So, did I do any mistakes? So now is the time to see. I did do a mistake, so I have this error. Okay, what does it say? Unique constraint failed, main table ID. And I guess I just forgot to remove the old table from my exercise. Okay. Correcting all the issues. So here I had this error saying no such table main table. What I understood is that I couldn't create a table, so just checking out here I could see that I didn't close my parenthesis for my test here. So I'm gonna remove this and go into that. Okay, so I can see that I printed my first line, which is ~w password 123. That's good, so it's working out. Now, maybe we want to try it out with more stuff, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a first test dot add many and call R1. So what are we gonna do here? Well, we're gonna follow a add many value, that the function that I haven't called yet, haven't created yet, sorry. So we're gonna do it add many. And I think add many is going to be interesting. Add many is just going to take one thing, and it's a list of data. And I think it's something you have to know if you intend on creating databases, because it's really useful. What it allows you to do is, instead of importing a tuple of keys every time, you're able to import a list of tuples, meaning that this one-liner is going to operate for every tuple in your list. How do you do that? Well, with a self curse dot execute many, and this execute many is going to work exactly the same way here, but instead of that tuple, we're going to add our list of data. This list of data is just going to be an iteration of R1, so this first tuple and then the second. So what happens if I run this? Then I have an error. Why? So we can see that our try worked over there because we have the main table already exists, but we couldn't add it because I didn't remove my database, my values here. So what I'm going to do instead of testing those or deleting it is just remove the database and run it again. And here I see that I have added first my tilt and password, and then I added every row one after the other. So it's working out. But what we had before was very interesting, right? It was an error because my table already existed and those values were already in it. And my add value has no way of checking out if the value is already into it. Obviously, I did it already before. I did a try and accept, so I could do that everywhere. But that was annoying me, and I realized that I came across something that I kind of liked, and it was the occasion for me to use it, and it's decorators. And decorators are way above my understanding right now, so I just dug into it to manage and find a way of making it work. And this is what I came with. So we're going to define outside of the class to make it easier for various reasons. Check func. A check func. So for some reason I just delete everything instead of just selecting what I've messed up. So I don't know if you guys are like me. My check func function is going to call another function. So we're going to nest it into another that is going to be my wrapper function. And this is going to use args and star star quargs. So what we need here is to have the star and star star. Args and quargs are just the standard ways of saying for star arguments and starred keywords arguments, which could be any amount of them, and to be sure that any amount of values could be passed through that wrapper function. And in here we're going to do a try and then return our function of, again, args and quargs. And then we're gonna have this except keyword, and here I want to add two errors that I came across the most, which is sq.operational error and .integrity error, which are the two errors that I came across coding all this. And we're going to print that. So the func dot underscore underscore name underscore underscore, okay, returns an error. Please try again with another value. Okay, let's not get too much deep into this, but well, what we're gonna do is just say this function failed. Maybe like you had the wrong value. I don't know. Okay, so what's it gonna do? We're gonna do, for every query that we're gonna have underneath here, we're gonna pass it through that function so that we try to return it. And then if we have an error, we're gonna just go into this and in the end return none. I could put an error message, but I'm already printing something, so it should be enough. But this is not complete because right now we're not returning anything upper than to my check func method, so we're gonna return the wrapper func. Be careful with that because if you mess up the indentation here, or if you put the brackets in there, it's not going to work. You want to be returning wrapper func into def func, into check func, sorry. Okay, and if you do that, then you're returning this call of wrapper func. Okay, you're not going to return an empty version of wrapper func that you would create here. See, it became blue because I created a new object. Here, I'm just calling for what is inside of this. Okay, so that's the nuance. And now what I can do is everywhere add this at check func before every different function to make sure that I'm going to check it out. Okay. And now if I rerun it, what should happen is that I have my main table that already exists and then my values, my functions that are returning an error. Which is funny is that my add many function is not returning an error. I don't know why. It should, but well, I'm gonna go too deep into that. So yeah, that's basically it. The whole thing though is gonna look like that. I have a few more stuff in there. I have a delete entry, an update entry, save query. If that is going to be linked to the pop-up, checkout box that you're going to have in your GUI and stuff like that. So this is the main thing for now, and I think that I covered a lot of interesting topics. I had to work back on them, so that was very interesting for me. Well, this has been long but very fun. So yeah, thank you, and maybe see you soon for the GUI. Bye.